objection to that?
No, however, I would ask that the exception that applies to the defendant being allowed to stay, of course, as it typically applies to the state, applies to the lead investigator. Because of the broad-ranging investigation involved in this, I'm asking that the court allow the state to designate 2 lead investigators. And that would be the charging officer, Stephen Foster, as well as the lead reconstructionist, Alan Trueblood, excuse me.
Okay. Any objection?
Your Honor, I don't have an objection to that. Thank you.
And did the state...
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have one objection.
Sorry. Did the state want to make a reciprocal motion?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And also, I did want to address, and
Does the defense want to be heard on that?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Okay.
And something that I did not address in our pretrial conference I would like to address now. I would ask that there will be family members of the victims who are potential witnesses here. However, the substance of their testimony is not to the facts of the crash and the death as much as potentially to serve as witnesses to attest to the events leading up to the crash, to attest to them having been alive prior to the crash and that sort. So I'm asking that the court allow that family members of the victims be allowed to remain in the courtroom during the entirety of the trial. I don't think they're the character of witness where their testimony would be contaminated in some way by hearing other testimony, I would contend.
No objection whatsoever, Your Honor.
All right. The motion to sequester then is allowed. It is reciprocal. It will go and apply to both sides with the exception of law enforcement officers Foster and Trueblood and family members of victims.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, Mr. David. One last point. We, of course, ask that Mr. Kania, Chandler Kania's family, be allowed to be in the courtroom as well.
I understand the reason for the request. I would contend there is a difference involving his parents because of their potential testimony having to do with events leading up to his behavior before and after the crash. And so I would oppose their being able to hear testimony of other witnesses.
My request stands. I would ask but his mother and father be allowed to be in the courtroom, Your Honor. I'm not aware that they have any testimony of his condition prior to the crash.
I don't know.
I may misunderstand you.
To be fair, I guess maybe could we hold that open and give the state a chance to prepare a more formal response?
All right, I at this time will not apply the sequestration to the defendant's parents, but I'll also say that that is without prejudice such that the trial judge may revisit that piece of the sequestration order if it is necessary.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, defense filed a motion for complete recordation. The state does not wish to be heard.
All right, and I just want to make sure I understand, is that applying to bench conferences?
Yes, sir.
Can we talk about that?
Yes, sir. Should we approach the bench?
I'm not sure that that's going to have any real effect.
I understand, Your Honor. Doesn't apply to bench conferences, that's fine, Your Honor.
I mean, I just feel like we've all tried enough cases. I
understand.
think we can get what we need on the record without sending the jury out to talk about whether
Yes,
we're
sir.
going to break for lunch at 12:10.
I agree with that
So-
line of thinking. That's just fine.
Okay.
Excluding bench conferences.
Okay. And you all just be sure and talk with the trial judge about how to address any substantive matters that might be addressed at the bench. My practice would be to capture them on the record later, or to send the jury out and address that from the tables instead of at the bench. So, as a rule, I don't think it's all about logistics in the jury, not about
Yes, sir.
anybody's rights or the public nature of the proceedings. So,
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the motion for complete recordation other than bench conferences is allowed.
The defense filed a motion for individual jury voir dire. The state would like to be heard.
And I thought we were going to reserve that for the trial judge.
Thank you. You're right. The state filed a motion for joinder of the matters. At least unofficially, I think the defense agreed that they were not opposed, but we're asking that all the charges, and it has been filed formally with the court, that are on the calendar, all charged for the events of July 18th through the 19th in a continuous set of behavior, that they all be joined for trial.
No objection.
Okay, without objection, motion for joinder is allowed.
The state has been served with notice of a motion to suppress the fruits of a search of Mr. Kania's cellular or mobile telephone on the grounds it was seized unlawfully. That is a substantive motion for which the state is prepared to present witnesses. We'd like to proceed with that now.
Okay.
I've said that. Might need a minute on that, Judge. I didn't realize that. I think not. Your Honor, I do have a motion to address before we get into the substance of this motion. I would be requesting sequestration of the witnesses in this matter, and I'll lay out why. It is possible that a key issue is what happened in an interaction between members of the Kania family and troopers when the search warrant was served and executed. And we contend that their testimony would bear more justiciable fruit, for lack of a better phrase, if witnesses don't hear what other people have to say about those interactions. And so my request, obviously Mr. Kania, I'm not requesting that he be excluded, but that Mr. Kania's parents, who I think are here, that they be excluded. And I've already sequestered all of my witnesses, and they've been instructed to not discuss their testimony with each other in between and follow the rules of sequestration. So I'm making that request to sequester witnesses.
As long as that is reciprocal, and I appreciate that, we're fine with that procedure.
Okay. And that's just for this one motion.
That's correct.
Okay. So for purposes of this motion, the court will order sequestration and ask The only remaining folks who would need to leave would be the defendant's parents.
And the state would call as its first witness Trooper Foster.
All right.
Left hand on the Bible and raise your right. You sign for a testimony about to give this court to be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, ma'am.
May I inquire?
Give me 1 second.
Yes, sir. Sir, please state your name and occupation for the court.
Stephen Foster, I'm a trooper with North Carolina Highway Patrol.
How long have you been with Highway Patrol?
Not quite 8 years.
Prior to that, any law enforcement experience?
I worked for the Chandler Kania Sheriff's Office for not quite 8 years. Before that, I was a sergeant when I left there.
Okay. I want to draw your attention to...
Is that Chatham?
Castle.
Castle.
I want to draw your attention to July the 19th of 2015, where you called to investigate a certain crime.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to carry you along a little bit. And did that involve Chandler Kania?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did your investigation yield any facts or circumstances which led you to believe there could be evidence of this crime on his mobile telephone?
Yes, sir.
Just speaking of the phone itself, can you tell us what those were?
Yes, sir. Myself and Sergeant Collins went to the hospital. I actually went there first. Spoke to someone else. Sergeant Collins got there. We did interview Mr. Kania briefly. At that point, we stepped out. Mr. Kania's parents had arrived in the waiting room, and we asked if they would speak to us. We did go into a separate room, and they did speak to us. During that conversation with them, we were advised that some of his friends had his cell phone.
And when you say we were advised, how do you mean?
His parents told myself and Sergeant Collins that sometime the night before that one of his friends had got his cell phone from him.
Okay. Anything else that came out of that conversation having to do with the phone?
Yes, sir. His parents were actually communicating with 2 of his friends that said they had the phone. We were actually advised that those friends were on their way to the hospital to bring the phone there at that time.
Okay. And if you remember, provide a little more detail. When you say they were communicating, were you made aware how that communication was happening?
Text message.
Okay. Did Ms. Kania either read or show you text messages she was receiving?
She was telling us about text messages. I didn't see any.
Okay. All right. So based on the conversation with parents, you had some belief the phone was headed to Chandler from the...
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, did you at some point, yourself or along with other troopers, make a decision that you wanted to seek seizure of that phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What, if any, steps did you take toward that?
Well, the reason why, or,
Yes.
okay, we felt like he had the phone the night prior, and we felt like there may be text messages on there that involved drinking or anything of that nature, back and forth with friends, while he still had the phone.
Okay. And so what, if anything else, did you do in the procurement of the search warrant?
I spoke with Trooper True Blood, Sergeant Collins. I had gone to the hospital the remainder of that week. I was at the hospital every day, at least once a day. I would speak to the surviving victim. I'd also go by that room. I did not speak to Mr. King at all. I did speak to his parents. I would check on his condition and what his outlook was for release. And every time that I went to the room, that I recall, both parents were there with him.
Okay. You may have said this before, but did you get the identities, meaning the names of his parents?
I did.
What were they? Are they?
Michael was his father's name. I don't remember his mother's first name.
Okay. So are you the one who actually got the warrant and/or executed it?
No, sir.
Who did?
Sergeant Stewart obtained the search warrant, and Trooper Hazelton is the one that executed the search warrant.
So other than that, to which you've already testified, did you do anything else as far as the investigation portion relating to the seizure of the cell phone?
Other than the conversation with Sergeant Stewart and Trooper Drew Blood, Sergeant Collins, and as I said, Sergeant Collins was there as well when they stated that the phone was supposedly being returned to them, and then they had been at the hospital there with Chandler.
In that sentence you just said, you said they. Who's they?
I'm sorry.
They had said the phone was going to be returned to them.
Mr. and Ms. King, Chandler parents.
Okay. Okay. No further questions on that.
All right, Cross.
Yes, sir, Your Honor, thank you. Trooper Foster, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
On July 19th, 2015, you responded to the scene of the collision on I-85, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you responded there, you noted that I will call him Chandler instead of Mr. Kania because I don't want to confuse parents if that's okay
Yes, sir.
with you.
Yes, sir.
You noticed Chandler was trapped inside his Jeep at the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
At the scene, and as part of your investigation, again, still remaining at the scene, you didn't find an iPhone there at the scene, correct?
No, sir.
At what point, at some point, excuse me, Chandler was taken via ambulance to UNC Hospital, right?
Yes, sir.
When did you first arrive at the hospital? Up thereabouts, I know that may be a tough question.
Yes, sir. I'm going to say it was probably between 2 and 2.5 hours after the collision,
Okay.
and that's an estimate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Were you the first law enforcement officer? I understand you're with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. Were you the first law enforcement officer that arrived at the hospital?
Involved with this case?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Did you get there before Chandler's parents? His dad's Michael and his mom is Stephanie.
Okay. Yes, sir, I did.
You did. When you got there, what's the first thing you did when you got to the hospital? In the hospital room, rather, just to go back through all that area.
Well, when I arrived at the hospital, I did not speak to Chandler until Sergeant Collins got there. We went in together to speak to Chandler. When I got to the hospital, I got the nurse that was attending to the surviving victim, and we went in, and I was just trying to get information about who she was and who the other child was and vehicle, that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. When you got to Chandler's room, did you speak with a nurse or a doctor regarding his condition or state of mind before you went in the room to speak with him?
I'm sure I did ask him about his condition.
Okay. Why did you wait for Sergeant Collins to get there before you went in the room?
When we went in the room, we were intending on interviewing Chandler.
Yes, sir.
And Sergeant Collins has recording equipment, and it was our intention to record the interview.
Do you know if he in fact recorded that interview?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
You believe that was recorded and placed into evidence?
I believe it was, yes, sir.
What do you mean placed into evidence?
Their evidence, just for their purposes, Your Honor, not courtroom evidence. I apologize.
Okay.
Yes, sir? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right? Okay. You both went in and you initially spoke with Chandler for a short period of time. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it was fairly brief.
Did you ask him about his, we keep saying a phone, it was an iPhone, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you ask him about the iPhone?
Not that I recall.
Did you ask, had you asked anybody about an iPhone? Or was an iPhone even part of your thinking as far as the investigation was going at this point in time?
No, sir, it wasn't.
At some point, Chandler's parents, Michael and Stephanie, came to the hospital. Do you about what time that was? How long you'd been there? I know that's tough.
No, sir, I'm not sure.
Okay. You and Sergeant Collins initially went in and spoke with Chandler. At some point, I'm assuming some other law enforcement did arrive at the hospital. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall who?
There was a sergeant with ALE and an agent with ALE.
One of those is named Richardson. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Yes, sir, that,
Okay. But there were two folks from ALE. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Any other law enforcement agencies involved show up at the hospital?
No, sir, not that I recall.
When Michael and Stephanie Kania got to the hospital, did you and Trooper Collins go in a side interview with them?
Yes, sir. We asked if they speak to us and they agreed. Yes, sir.
Do you recall if that interview was recorded by Sergeant Collins?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
Is that the first time the subject of an iPhone entered your thinking and the part of your investigation of the crash?
Yes, sir.
How did that come about, you know?
I believe it was his mother that was communicating with his friends, and she had advised us that one of the friends had his cell phone.
And at that point, it became clear, hey, Chandler doesn't have the iPhone, right?
Yes, sir.
And it was clear at that point that Stephanie and Michael Kania, neither one of them had the iPhone either, correct?
At that point, yes, sir.
It was your understanding from Stephanie Kania that someone, I think you would refer to them as friends, Chandler's friends, would be bringing the iPhone to the hospital. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know who those friends were by name?
And not who was supposed to be bringing the phone at that time.
Do you know what they were going to do with the phone when they got to the hospital?
They were supposed to be returning it
To who?
to the parents for Chandler,
To the parents for Chandler, correct?
my understanding.
Given his condition, meaning Chandler, given his condition and injuries, he wouldn't have had much need for an iPhone at that time, right?
Probably not, no, sir.
And so the phone was going to be brought by Chandler's friends to the parents for safekeeping for Chandler, right?
I would have to make an assumption.
But that's what you were thinking, right?
Yes, sir, that they were going to return it to his parents for him.
How long did you stay at the, and this is, let's put this in context for our purposes today. The crash happens around 3 a.m. You're at the hospital around 5:30 or 6 a.m. Is that close?
Yes, sir.
Close.
I think so.
How long did you stay, this is Sunday morning,
Yes, sir.
how long were you at the hospital on Sunday?
I believe that I left the hospital sometime around 8 o'clock.
8 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
Had the iPhone arrived at the hospital prior to your leaving the hospital?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you come back to the hospital and we're staying on Sunday, please sir, we're staying on Sunday, July 19th, 2015. Did you come back to the hospital that Sunday? Do you know?
That night, yes, sir.
You came back that night?
Yes, sir.
When you came back to the hospital that night, had the iPhone been returned to Chandler's parents, Michael and Stephanie?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
Do you know where the iPhone was?
At that time?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Had you spoken with, we have referred to them as friends, and that's fine for today. Had you spoken with any of the friends during the day, in between when you left the hospital on Sunday morning and you came back Sunday evening?
I was there for a brief time, not about anything of any substance. They were interviewed by Sergeant Collins with the recon.
I'm sorry, Trooper.
Sergeant Collins.
They had interviewed the friends. They had interviewed the friends. Is that what, I just want to be clear for the record.
They spoke with the friends that morning.
That morning. Did you talk with Trooper Trueblood about the iPhone?
That we did speak about the iPhone, yes, sir.
Where? Where were you? You guys at the hospital? Did you talk on the phone?
On the phone after that day.
Okay. We just sort of giving him the heads up, hey, an iPhone, the Chandler's iPhone is supposed to be coming here at some point and given to Chandler's parents by some friends. Was that the essence of that conversation?
Yes, sir, that was our belief.
You had that conversation with Trooper Trueblood. Did you speak with Trooper Stewart about that?
Yes, sir.
When and where did you talk with Trooper Stewart about an iPhone?
I spoke with him on the phone as well. We spoke to each other multiple times on the phone during that week.
What about Trooper Azelton? When does he enter the picture?
I'm
What's
not
the
sure.
relevance of this?
Trooper Azelton, I believe, Your Honor, is going to be the person that actually served the search warrant at some point.
Okay, but I mean, aren't I being asked to determine whether or not the warrant, there are grounds in there's probable cause in the warrant,
That's part of the argument.
which is a four corners argument.
Sure. Yes,
So we
sir.
don't need any evidence on that. And then the other is when and where it was
Yes, sir.
executed.
And I'm getting there right now.
Okay.
I'm about to wrap up right now.
Great.
Sorry, Your Honor.
It's all right.
Trooper Stewart, Trooper Stewart is the law enforcement officer that ultimately made an affidavit and applied for a search warrant for the iPhone. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you two discuss exactly what was going to go into the application for the warrant?
And as far as what I told him about the phone being returned to the parents.
Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
But it was ultimately, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sir. As far as the phone was supposed to have been returned to the parents, and also I went to the hospital every evening to check on the victim. I would also stop and check on Chandler.
Yes, sir.
I never spoke to him, of course, because he had asked for counsel.
Yes, sir.
I did speak with his parents and his attending physician just to check on his condition and where he was at as far as his treatment. And I would speak to the parents most every day, and every time that I stopped, both of them were there with me. And so I advised Trooper Stewart of that all three of them had been in the hospital when I've been there.
Yes, sir. And ultimately, so Trooper Stewart, he made the application for the search warrant, and then it was Trooper Azelton that actually served the search warrant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is it your understanding that the search warrant for the iPhone was to cover Chandler, his dad, his mom, or other persons in the hospital room, because that's where y'all thought the phone was coming, right?
Objection, Levy Group.
He can answer it. He's asking for a conclusion that I'm not going to be bound by, but he can say what he thinks. So, overruled.
Yes, sir. When I talked to Trooper Stewart about taking out the search warrant, it was our belief that the phone was with them, and as I say, they had all three been in the hospital room when I had gone by.
Trooper Azelton ultimately served the warrant of Michael Kania, Chandler's dad, in Asheboro, North Carolina, correct?
Yes, sir, I believe that's correct.
No further questions. Thanks so much, Trooper Foster.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Redirect.
No, no.
Thank you,
Your
sir.
Honor.
You can step down. All right, the state may call its next witness.
Sergeant Collins.
Come on in, sir. Thank you.
Left hand on the Bible, raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give this court to be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Amen.
All right.
Sir, please state your name and occupation for the court.
John Collins, I'm a sergeant with the North Carolina Highway Patrol.
How long have you been with the Highway Patrol?
It'll be 15 years next week.
Is that your entire law enforcement career?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you about July 19th of last year, where you called in to investigate an incident involving Jahnia King?
Yes, sir, I was.
And for today's purposes, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but can you explain briefly what your role is with the Highway Patrol?
Well, I'm a sergeant with the Collision Reconstruction Unit. It's, I guess the best way to describe that is kind of like CSI with cars type thing. And I was the state OD that week, which means I'm on call for the whole state as far as the reconstruction goes. So anything that would come in from pretty much any of our troops would have been directed to me, and I would have been either called out to the scene, called others out to the scene, or something like that. I would be responsible for those questions
Okay.
for that particular week.
So tell us how you, I guess, your first contact or interaction when you became part of this investigation.
Well, I was called that morning very early. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but they said they had a serious crash with 3 people dead on I-85 in Orange County. At that point, I started calling other people. I called Trooper True Blood, and because I knew he was in the Raleigh area, and Trooper Leventhal, who was actually lives in Alamance, I believe, Elon area, and had them go to the scene, and I went to the scene also.
Okay. What happened next?
I arrived on the scene. There's 2 cars there. Emergency personnel were there. Mr. King was not there, and the victims, I think, had been removed from the vehicles already. We started taking pictures, doing our normal thing, putting our game plan together. So taking pictures, documenting evidence. I called aviation, our helicopter, to come and take aerial pictures of that. So I was coordinating some of that stuff.
Okay. And I asked a really broad question. I'll try to focus in a little bit. As part of your investigation, did you look into if or whether the suspect had a mobile telephone?
We searched, well, we look at the scene, we look at all parts of it. So we're looking at the cars, looking at the vehicles, seeing what we have, see what's at play in this wreck. We knew that Mr. King had been transported to UNC Hospital. And I think Trooper Foster, I don't know if he was actually there at the scene when I got there or not, but he was already at the hospital when I got there. Trooper True Blood, Trooper Leventhal stayed on the scene and basically, I guess, measured the evidence with a total station.
I'm sorry, measure the evidence with a...
Total stations. It's the surveying equipment that the CDOT guys using all the time on the side of the road. So while they're doing that, I go into the hospital. We didn't find a cell phone in the vehicle or at the scene or wasn't on the road or anything like that, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay, no, we didn't see anything there.
Okay. Did you at some point, either directly or from other troopers, become aware that Mr. Kania at least owned a cellular telephone?
That came out when we went to the hospital. So when I get to the hospital, there's 2 ALE agents there. Trooper Foster's there. We go into the room where Mr. King is. He's on the bed, stretcher in an emergency room area by himself. And we start asking questions about the wreck. Basically starting off like, hey, are you okay? What's hurting? Just trying to get an understanding of his.
And so, to try to compress it a little bit, during that conversation, did you ask or receive any information about?
No, sir. No, so it was not until we talked to his parents in the, it's like a private family room off to the side of the emergency room. We were directed that they were in there. I don't know if they were in there initially, but that's where we spoke with them. And that's where all that started.
What information did you gather from your interview of Mr. King's parents that led you to believe that Mr. Chandler had or owned a cellular phone?
So as we're talking to them, we find out that Josh, maybe Josh Hall, I think that's his last name, Josh Hall and Alex Pugh were with Chandler that night. And through talking to them, they had received, I think the mother, Mr. King's mother.
You're talking to who?
We're talking to Mr. and Mrs. King, Chandler's parents. So as we're talking to them, they're telling us, the mother is actually reading text off her phone saying that she got these from Alex or Josh, I can't remember which one. She also got a message from Ditz, which his real name was, I think, Ditya Shaw. Anyway, Ditz said that he had his phone, Mr. Chandler's phone. He said I think they relayed the information that he was trying to leave. They knew he shouldn't be leaving the fraternity house, which is right around the corner from the hospital. And as he left, Ditz grabbed his phone, so he had the phone. And then we had the understanding that that phone was given to Josh and Alex. And later on, we figured out that they weren't at the fraternity house anymore when we went there. So as soon as we talked to the parents, we went to the fraternity house. Josh and Alex weren't there, but we were told, I think they might have slept there because they couldn't get back into Chandler's apartment. So they were kind of stuck. They might have spent the night at the fraternity house.
Okay. Did you speak with Ditya Shaw, or if it's allowed, Ditz? Did you speak with Ditz when you went to the fraternity?
We did. That was the first person we spoke to.
Were you able to confirm the information you got in secondhand earlier that Ditz at some point had gained control over that phone the night of the wreck?
Yes, we went to the fraternity house. Actually called the president coming out. He led us into the fraternity house and said, yeah, Ditz is here. And he woke him up. And we brought him out to the parking lot, and I interviewed him in my patrol car. And Ditz said that that night that they were all together. And at some point I think they might have split up, but anyway, they ended up in the parking lot of the fraternity house. Chandler was trying to leave. They knew he'd been drinking. They knew he shouldn't have driven. So they were trying to talk him out of drive. He was the only one in his Jeep. He took off out of the parking lot. He must have went around a block or so because they said he wasn't going long. Came back, said he just sat there in his Jeep, and Ditz said that he thought if he grabbed his phone, he wouldn't leave without it. I think the phone was actually sitting on his lap or somewhere where he could reach it. He reached in the door or the window, I think it was the door, and grabbed the phone and took it. Well, Chandler left again, and they never saw him.
Okay. And you got that information directly from Ditz?
From Ditz, yes, sir.
And you mentioned earlier that you had gained the understanding that at some point the phone had passed from Ditz to either Josh or Alex.
Yes, sir.
Did you get that information from Ditz, or do you remember?
It may have come from his mother too. There might have been a mix of stories there because I know Miss King was reading us texts from her phone. I think they were from Josh or Alex saying they couldn't find Chandler. And I'm pretty sure that one came from Ditz, maybe saying he had his phone. I'm not sure how they intertwined that.
Let's just illustrate one point.
I know Ditz didn't have it when we interviewed him.
Thank you. You sort of touched on this, but Josh or Alex, to your knowledge, were they fraternity brothers or also students at UNC, or were they visitors from out of
My understanding, they were visitors from out of town. They might have been brothers, but not from that chapter, I don't think. I think they were like his folks from Ashboro, like maybe high school friends. That's what the assumption I had. And I think they'd been in Wilmington all together the night before for a concert or a show or something and driven up to Chapel Hill.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay, as far as collecting any information about the phone at the fraternity house, do you recall getting any more info on that while at that visit?
Ditz was the most, I guess, had the most information because he was more involved, I guess. We spoke to two other of his fraternity brothers and friends. They confirmed him leaving. I don't know if Case was there when he actually left. I don't think he was. I know Ditz, Josh, and Alex, I think, were at the parking lot when he left.
Okay. Were Josh or Alex at the fraternity house when you went?
I've never spoken to them.
Got it, okay.
Well, I think we tried to call him on the phone that morning or later that day, but I've never seen him in person.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
All right, so the phone wasn't found at or on anybody at the fraternity house?
My understanding is those two boys had it, and they were on the way to the hospital.
Okay.
So I'm assuming they took it with them. I don't know. I never saw the phone until I examined it.
Gotcha. Okay. The information that you just testified to that you gathered from your interviews at the fraternity house, did you relay that information to any of the other troopers investigating this case?
Yes, sir.
Was one of them Alan Trudlow?
Yes, sir.
Do you know
He was a member of to kind of break everything up here, I'm a member of the Greenville team in Reconstruction. We have 5 offices. One of them's in Raleigh, one of them's in Greenville, Fayetteville, and so on. I was on call, and I used to work in the Raleigh office. So since I was on call and immediately involved in the case, I kind of became involved, but then it kind of transferred to Alan's office, Trooper Trudlow. So of course I would have spoke to him. We met, he came to the fraternity house that morning while I was interviewing those 3 guys, and then we went to the Chapel Hill Police Department and kind of powwow together, all of us. We had so much information coming in, we had to talk about it, everything together.
Got it. Okay. So was Sergeant Stewart in that powwow?
He was not. It was Trooper Leventhal, Trooper Trueblood, and 2 ALE agents.
Okay.
Agent Richardson and Agent Cates.
Okay. Got it. And I'm aware that you had a role in the eventual extraction of the information out of the cell phone, but other than that, did you do any other pre-seizure investigation involving the cell phone that you haven't already testified to?
No, sir.
Okay. Nothing further under that.
Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Sergeant Collins. You initially responded to the scene out on I-85. Had you come all the way from Greenville?
No, sir. I live in Apex.
Okay. You responded to the scene when you got there. Chandler Kania had already been removed
Yes,
from
sir.
the vehicle and taken to the hospital. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
How long did you stay at the scene before you went to UNC Hospital, Sergeant Collins?
I know when I got there it was dark, and when I left it was light. But we were right around sunrise, so I'm not really sure how long we were there. Or I was there. I wasn't there as long as the others.
Yes, sir. You went to the hospital and you met Trooper Foster there, is that correct?
He was already there. Yes, sir.
Was there any other law enforcement there that you know of?
Those 2 ALE agents, the same ones I mentioned.
Yes, sir, Richardson and Cates.
Yes, sir.
You and Foster, Trooper Foster, excuse me, you both went in the room, briefly spoke with Chandler,
All
correct?
4 of us did.
All 4 of you
Yeah.
did?
I was conducting an interview, they were present.
You had the recording equipment, I think Trooper
Yes.
Foster was waiting for you to come with the recording
Yes,
equipment,
sir.
right? At some point, Michael and Stephanie Kania, that's Chandler's parents, they arrived at the hospital, and you and Trooper Foster went in a family-type room to interview them or speak with them?
Yes, sir.
Any other law enforcement, or was it just you and Trooper Foster?
Those other two agents.
All four of you were in
Yes, sir.
there? Okay. Were you primarily asking the questions, or was everybody sort of asking a question as it would come up?
Since Trooper Foster was investigating Trooper, he kind of led it from there. I asked some questions, and Agent Cates, I don't think, he actually hadn't even gone to ALE school yet. He was actually in his training period, but I think he was with Durham PD for 28 years or so, 25, 30
Yes, sir.
years. He retired from there, went to ALE. So he was taking notes, I believe. Agent Richardson, he would ask some questions, and I would ask some kind of follow-up questions.
When you all spoke with the Kanyas, the parents, was that interview recorded?
No, sir.
That's the first time that the notion of an iPhone came up, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At some point, you went to the fraternity house, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to the fraternity house to try to interview, who did you go there to interview?
Well, she gave me, Miss Kania, she gave me Ditz's number, his phone number, and I think Josh and Alex. And we went over there to look, well, we started with Ditz, because we knew his name. And we found the president actually walking out, the president of the fraternity, and he led us to Ditz's room, woke him up for us.
Had you spoken with Ditz? And his full name is Aditya Shah, is that
That's
correct?
it. Yes, sir.
And his nickname is Ditz?
Yes, sir. That's what he told us to call him, sir.
Can someone spell Aditya?
I believe it is Adityah, Your Honor. Shah, Shah. Ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So you literally got fraternity house, let in by the president, and went straight up to his room to wake him up.
Yes, sir.
Did you speak with him while you were in his fraternity room, I guess?
No, so the president said, hey, some officers out here need to talk to you. He was sleeping, and basically told him he needed to get up. This was important. He needed to talk to us, because we were standing right there in the hallway.
Yes, sir.
We didn't say anything really other than, hey, good morning, hey, we got a few questions for you, but we led him back down to, my truck was in the parking lot of a marked Tahoe. And he sat in the front seat, I sat in the driver's seat, and Trooper Leventhal, I know he was in one, he might have been in that interview also, but he got into the back seat behind Ditz. And that's where we talked.
What, I'm sorry. What time was it when you got the fraternity house thereabouts?
I'd say it was after 7, maybe closer to 8 or 9.
When Ditz came down, you put him in the Tahoe to do an interview, right? You, Trooper Leventhal,
Yes.
you, Trooper Leventhal, and Ditz in the Tahoe. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Nobody else?
Yes, sir.
Was that interview recorded?
Yes, sir.
Was it recorded via a handheld device, or did you use your in-dash camera system in the Tahoe?
I don't have a camera. It's actually my handheld device. The batteries were dead, so I used my iPhone.
You use your iPhone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Has that been logged in properly into?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, Ditz told you at this time that Chandler, not without getting into the details of the whole night, but that Chandler had gotten in his car and driven off one time, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he came back in the parking lot, right?
Yes, sir.
And on that time, that's when Ditz, Aditya Shah, went up to the car and grabbed the iPhone out of the car. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then Chandler drove away the second time.
Yes, sir.
That's exactly what he told you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Who did he say he gave Chandler's phone to? We've heard two names, Josh Hall and Alex Pugh.
I don't know which one.
Just not sure which one it was?
No, sir.
What did you do next? How long did you interview Ditz in the Tahoe?
We probably talked for maybe 10 to 20 minutes or so.
Have you done any subsequent interviews with him?
No, sir, I haven't spoken to him since.
Did you interview any other witnesses in the case other than Ditz?
At that time, I interviewed Mason McConnell and then Chase Aldridge.
Where did you interview Mason McConnell?
Same place.
Okay, in the Tahoe at the
One guy
attorney house?
Next we got him.
Sorry, Madam Clerk. I'll slow down, ma'am.
Well, just one at a time.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Did you interview Mason McConnell at the fraternity house?
Yes, sir, in park line in my truck.
Did you also interview Case Aldridge at the fraternity house in your Tahoe?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Trooper Collins. So you had learned that Ditz either gave the phone to a Josh Hall or an Alex Pugh. What did you do next?
After interviewing those three, I think that's when we went to Chapel Hill PD. They had a conference room and we met with the two ALE agents because we kind of all went different directions. So then we came back to Chapel Hill PD for the sole reason of just using their space and to discuss the case and kind of put all our parts together.
That would have been you, Trooper Trueblood, Trooper Leventhal, ALE Agent Cates, and ALE Agent Richardson, right?
Yes, sir.
But not Trooper Sergeant Stewart. Is Trooper Stewart a sergeant?
Sergeant Stewart, yes.
Sergeant Stewart. Not Sergeant Stewart, though, right?
No, sir, I don't believe he was present.
He wasn't present then. After you folks had the powwow, I believe that's how you referred to it, at Chapel Hill Police Department, can you give me a time frame? Approximately what time is this?
That's close to lunchtime.
Lunchtime on Sunday, July the 19th, 2015.
Mhm.
When did you go back? Did you go to the hospital again?
I never went back to the hospital.
You never went back to the hospital?
No, sir.
What was your next involvement with the case?
I think earlier in that week, I started working on financial records, getting search warrants for financial records for Mr. Kania. I know I was speaking of Wells Fargo about his account, basically to see where he may have spent money that night.
Yes, sir.
And then once the phone was seized, I downloaded it, I think later that week, or maybe the next week.
When did you get, strike that, let me back up a little bit. It's your understanding that Sergeant Stewart did an affidavit and applied for a search warrant for the iPhone, correct? Do you know?
I know he got it signed. I don't know what went into that. I wasn't part of that.
You weren't part of helping draft
No.
the application for the search warrant itself, right?
No, sir. Trooper Trueblood and I may have had some discussion about it in the office, but he was more involved in that than I was.
Sergeant Stewart was.
And Trooper Trueblood.
And
Yes,
Trooper
sir.
Trueblood. Yes, sir. When did you take possession of the iPhone?
It was in the Hillsborough office. Sergeant Stewart, I believe he was there that day when I downloaded it. I think he got it out of the evidence locker.
Do you remember if you remember, what day was that?
I don't remember what day, but it's documented, but I
Yes,
can't
sir.
recall right now.
And what did you do with the phone when you got it in your possession?
It was downloaded.
No further questions. Thank
All
you,
right.
Trooper Collins.
All right, redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can step down.
Trooper Trueblood.
Okay. we would normally take a break somewhere around now. I'm not saying we have to right this minute, but just for court staff purposes, how many more witnesses do we have?
2 more in candor, Your Honor. My guess is Trooper Trubla would be on the longer time.
Okay. Since we're still waiting on him to come in, or her, to come in the courtroom, why don't we just go ahead and take a 15-minute recess now?
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Court stands in recess for 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
There you go.
I'm next.
That sounds perfect. Mine was third and that pretty well supported by the second report, so. Food for, he says, 2 the rest of this week, 2 weeks. I'm scheduled. I can do what we were trying to I'm still harvesting. It's not feeling that way right now. Yeah.